would that kind of sum up, I suppose, the fact that your head was kind of always in the artistic side, that your brain and other things, even as a young man.
Maybe it's just I didn't like soccer. It could be that. To be honest with you, there came a time when Jesus, I said this is boring shit. That was my attitude to it. I just went away from it. But he was pulling my hair. I had a fine head of blonde hair, unlike now, and this was getting my nerves. So I said to my father when I went home, I said, "Your man is pulling my hair all day." My father said that the next time he does that, now he says, "You turn around and hit him in the face with your fist closed. That should fix him." So sure enough, I did what my father told me, and the following day, and his nose bled. Poor devil, God rest him. I didn't get my hair pulled anymore.
The rosary was getting a good airing. The car going up, and your mother and Dan were the most enthusiastic of it. But my grandfather,
Was it?
my grandfather could maybe kind of had a sense that maybe not everyone was enjoying the repetitive, monotonous
Well, you see, he
prayer.
was he was he was aware of other people. He was
Yeah, he kind of nipped it in the bud anyway by saying, I think we have enough of it on this stage, like. While we're on the subject of people gone before their time, your brother Gerard,
yeah,
who you mentioned, plays a
yeah.
big role in one of your short stories, "Walking the Cow to the Bull," where you
Oh yeah,
help a neighbour bring
that's right.
a cow down 2 miles up the road.
Yeah,
Um,
Clown Con.
yeah, you mentioned Jack and the Beanstalk as enduring, and that kind of the image that I had made the same connection, and even your dad as well, a great empathy with the couple in
Oh
question,
yeah, that's
and
right. Yeah,
he didn't he defended them stoutly
that's right. Yeah.
when things, so that was nice to read as well, and that kind of gave an insight
Yeah.
to kind of
Well, he'd
Daniel
be like
together.
that. He would be for the underdog.
Yeah,
He was very much that way.
and he gave them their space, and he
Yeah.
wasn't judgmental, so
Right.
that was
Yeah.
nice. You're I get you from reading that book and reading other stuff. I think Jared and you were fairly good pals, you know, and got on well as brothers and that.
Yeah.
Like, did you lose a bit of touch in, we'll say, when you went to Munchins, or were you
I
kind of,
did. Yeah. I said we lost touch at that point. Yeah, we did. I
yeah,
did. It changed me all right. I'd have to admit that. I moved away, as I said at the start there. I actually left home.
mm,
I mean, I know I came home on holidays, but in one sense, apart from my connection with my father, I'd say I wasn't close to the rest of the family really anymore
mm.
in a major way.
I suppose my own father would have been very friendly with your growing up as well, but
Probably.
by all accounts, like, maybe
Yeah.
my father filled the void that you left by going to Munchins. I don't know the full story, but I know that they were very friendly growing up, and
Oh
even,
yeah, no, all would be. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, they were. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Meryl, Garda, and Derek there. I suppose I would obviously would have they would have visited with Pamela, God rest her soul, as well, who also
yeah,
passed away, and they would have visited Rahina, and we had a good bond with that family. We used to go up
yeah.
to Mike and myself used to go up with my parents to the moving crib. Do you ever hear that in Dublin? The moving crib. It's
It
like
just
waxwork.
rings a bell, but
We used to
I.
meet Pamela and Derek and the
Oh
girls
yeah,
up above in
yeah,
Houston Station. There's like a yearly
yeah.
thing, But you wrote a poem, I suppose, and it's quite an apt heading as well, I suppose.
Actually, before you go on, I just occurs to me now. I mean, I shouldn't probably saying it because I was the fall guy in one sense. I said the last time I met Gerald was the summer of the year he died. It was myself and Edmund. We went to. You were talking earlier about the barbarians, the barbars. I was after getting a new car, and so I said I probably had it a week or two. I said I'd go to this match. It was a friendly match, like today. It was only a friendly match, but no big deal. But they were playing in Dublin, um, an Irish selection. and we went to Lansdowne Road, and we were going to make a right day of it. And the Champion Stakes, which is a big event in the greyhound calendar, that was on. The final of that was on that night in Shelburne Park. So the plan was we'd go to the rugby match, and then we'd go and have something to eat, and we'd go on out to the dogs for the night. And I had only one thing in my head at the time. There was a dog called Farlow Melody. He was drawn six, and Matt O'Donnell was the trainer of him. He was also the trainer of the Dog and Trap One at First Mick, two great dogs. It's a big final now, big crowd at the dogs. But I had a big bet on Farlow Melody. He was in six, and he was 4-1 because he'd been beaten the week before. But he went down to win the English Derby. But anyway, the point is, Farlow Melody hopped out. I rang George, said I'd be there to call out himself, and there he came down to me. I understand George probably had a few bob on him, but not much. I said, this dog will win. He flashed out of the box. He led probably about 6 lengths down the back straight, and Matt O'Donnell's other dog caught him on the line, right on the line, a shot head for the finish. We lost after that. Mick won. So that was the last time I met George. As it turns out, it's a curious one, but
Well, that's funny you should say that, because yesterday I got a tip for a horse and I decided to share the wealth with everyone in the office, and it also lost. So I wasn't flavour of the month for a while there. But
I can tell a story of a bet I didn't win. Anyway, that was I think that was I was just thinking about it later. That was the last time I saw him. He died then. He wasn't down, and I was over in Broadford first, and he came down. He probably couldn't try in. He might come over. Sometimes he would, but I didn't see him anymore.
yeah.
He died nearly at Christmas.
But I remember that was the first funeral that I can remember. Like I think the first person I remember actually dying was my grandmother when I was 5. A vague, very
Yeah,
vague recollection of that. But even a 5-year-old's brain, kind of, you could kind of correlate that, she was shoving on, and
yeah.
But when Gerard died, when that was the first death, I kind of said, "Geez, this isn't right. Like,
Yeah,
this shouldn't be happening." It was the first kind of the first death,
yeah,
the first
yeah,
step that I felt
yeah,
if
absolutely.
that
Yeah, yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah.
But it's quite apt, the poem that you wrote about when you're kicking ball
Oh, yeah.
in
Down a
Rahena,
man.
down a man. And I suppose the family was down a man after that. But do you want to give us a bar of that?
Really sorry. Yeah, it's called Down a Man. Halfway through the summer holidays, the year I was going on 13, a bunch of us from the National, I can identify 6 or 7 regulars, used to gather in the schoolyard mid to late afternoon, as I recall. We get ourselves organised, warmed up, typically game ball, banging my brother's half-flat seaside football hard as we could, as if frustrated, against the sidewall. At some point, we might strip off jumpers or vests, careless and rough. We'd lob them about 10 feet apart. 2 sets of goalposts piled half random at both ends of the tarmacadam. When we kicked off, we used to give the ball our total attention. Being on the same side as would be natural, I'd pass regularly to my late brother. He'd pass to the late Jerry Scandon, and always poaching for a pass. Our New York-born foreign affairs man, Timmy, in the front desk, then as now, imagined he was another best. One afternoon, over on the right corner, as 3 or 4 rooted for the ball, the thought struck me in the middle of that pitch of a tarmacadam, how this carry-on was going nowhere. When the ball went dead for a fetching moment, I told them that I had enough of it, that I was going away, that I was doing something else, stretching and gripping without much bother my piece of the post on my shoulder. I climbed the wall as someone shouted after me, "Come on, man, come back." Out of sight and out of earshot, and with no reason to change my mind, I was already heading for these words, growing up, though I didn't realize it yet. Later, my brother understood when I explained that I was bored, that their game was mere kids carrying on. But he harangued me that I had ruined the game, that they had to start again, the sides uneven, his team down a man.
And I suppose, but that kind of sum up, I suppose, the fact that your head was kind of always in the artistic side, that your brain and other things, even as a young man.
Maybe it's just I didn't like soccer. It could be that. To be honest with you, I mean, it's not word for word. It's not a blow by blow account of something that happened. But something like that did happen. I remember there came a time when Jesus, I said, this is boring shit. That was my attitude to it. I just went away from it. I just turned it into a poem. Actually, the small thing that I mentioned, the late Jerry Scanlon, back to my father in a sense. You could say, when I was young in the national school, um, I this kind of became kind of, I don't know how I'd put it, but anyway, I was obviously sitting down, and behind me, Jerry Scanlon, he was in my class. He was behind me. Was he behind? He was behind me anyway. Maybe he was the class below me. He might have been in. He was in Jerry's class, behind me anyway. But he was pulling my hair. I had a fine head of blonde hair, unlike now, and this was getting my nerves. So I said to my father when I went home, I said, "Your man is pulling my hair all day." My father said that the next time he does that, now he says, "You turn around and hit him in the face with your fist closed. That should fix him." So sure enough, I did what my father told me, and the following day, and his nose bled. Poor devil, God rest him. But I became a kind of the talk of the place in the sense that Mick Vaughan, who had the forge back just beyond Cantora Cross, he used to come over to me afterwards and he'd look at me. And he'd messing, of course, he'd be saying, I don't know what box he was calling me, probably Sonny Liston. He'd stand back as if I was going to hit him. But that was only a joke. But I thought, see Jerry's name there now, it reminded me of it. But I didn't get my hair pulled anymore. But that would be my father again. He wouldn't interfere, but he just tipped me off. This how you fix it. Fix it.
Yeah.
I did.
Do you know what? These are the kind of stuff you need to stick up for yourself. I'd imagine you got a bit of grief after that, like for
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, but
Slagging,
yeah,
slagging. It happened
yeah,
to me as well in Ballybunion. I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm saying this on a podcast, but I remember we was go to Ballybunion every summer. And I remember being sitting down. And again, I was probably only 9 or 10 or 11. It probably shapes your personality and your. It made me independent, I suppose, without me realizing it. Maybe the gene was there anyway. But I remember sitting down after building this lovely sand castle, and there was a young fellow over from me making his own castle, and there was he probably out from Limerick City, maybe not, but wherever he was from, he came over and he gave my castle one merciful kick. In other words, he fixed my castle, right? But fate he wasn't going to get away with it. I attacked him. So we had a deadly fight, a right fight in the strand. Our two mothers they had to take us apart, and they were in serious shock at what happened. But I'd say he wouldn't kick any castles after that. I remember I got this surge of madness. And I said, Jesus, he's not going to do that. And I mean, I'd done before I realized it, but I didn't chicken out,
yeah,
which I suppose, as I say, which was a good thing.
yeah. No one, I suppose,
He was obviously a bully. I thought he'd pull that, he'd get away with it, but he didn't get away with it with me.
yeah.
Anyway,
A lot of bullies
yeah.
aren't the bravest when they're stood up to
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
yeah, in a lot of instances.
yeah. So,
Another sport based on that, Tom, you would have an interest in is boxing, and Muhammad Ali was an influence on your young self as well.
well, I obviously followed. Everybody followed the Muhammad Ali story. We were all watching it, of course. Yeah, yeah. When he came into his own in the '60s. Yeah. So
He
yeah.
and that inspired you to write the following.
Oh, it did. It was as a result of the Olympics. Remember the Olympics in Atlanta? He lit the flame at that Olympics to start the Olympics. He was the
Yeah.
guy that was called, and yeah, he was. You could see that time he was in trouble. So anyway, he lived on for a few more years. So I'm reading the greatest. With trembling hands, he opened the letter. Nobody around to cheer the champ. Pretty, when as a poet he jabbed and rhymed at the rabbit. Here he pauses with his legendary pause, labouring the seconds from hand to eyes. No space for a quip for the media, like the time he rejected the name of a conspirator of ancient Rome, the one with the lean lined with clay, to be a superman, a prophet, 3 times champion of the world. Now he trembles away from the limelight, but we have seen him to light a flame in Atlanta.
Yeah, I really liked the last couple of lines there, kind of it's poignant the way he
It
ended
is,
up.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's actually right, yeah. Yeah, he had the shakes. It was very sad.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's since passed on since you published that, but I just said I'd ask you to include it as well because
yeah, yeah.
Muhammad Ali was such, and he's made the front cover of your book as well.
Oh, yeah, that was a bit of a kind of a montage. The lady who was doing it at the time, she was her own Wicklow. That's what she suggested. I make a montage of the whole thing. Even you see the Hillman is there, and Mr. Magoo, the poem about Mr. Magoo.
Yep. You mentioned last time you met George there, and I have
Oh,
my
yeah.
own story of the last time I met George, which wasn't as fun as yours. He came into the kitchen visiting I think my father was out visiting my mother, and I was up in the bedroom at the back of the house, and I was messing around with the window,
Yeah.
and whatever way it fell down, on both my hands
Oh,
as
my.
a 5-year-old. So I was literally there with
Yeah.
both my hands stuck under a window, crushed like.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I naturally enough, I shouted and cried, and my mother, I'd say, was hoping to wrap Gerard up before she decided to come down. It wasn't a kind of an immediate
Yeah.
kind of journey down, so for
What age were you? What age
about,
were you that time?
about 5.
83. Yeah. All right.
So I kind of
Yeah.
associate
Yeah.
that meeting
Yeah.
Gerard last time with, with extreme pain. But mother put holy water on it, and it was better before I was married. And
Yeah.
she says that
Yeah.
it didn't cost me any trouble on my
No.
wedding day. So just moving on to your mother here, Tom, and it's
Yeah.
actually quite apt we're doing the podcast today because her anniversary is Monday in 2 days' time.
That's right. Yeah.
So and she was a month shy of her 101st birthday.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
She set the record
Yeah.
for the longest living Cronin
Mm.
in the family. There was
Sure.
by a
Right.
fair
Yeah.
distance actually. I think the second
Yeah.
third was Tom 95. My grandfather was 94. Dan was 90.
One was it?
The point is, I suppose they Dennis. They all kind of lived into
That's
their,
right. Yeah. Long livers. Yeah.
But she was a huge influence on your work, wasn't she?
Yeah. There's some poems written there. You have the scourging at the pillar, looking back to love, and nobody's business. I haven't. Most people wouldn't realize that actually that her personality is in that poem as well. Nobody's business. So she was a quiet. I won't say secretive, but literally nobody's business. That's a quote from her. So I read that poem
Yeah, I
every
do.
few
Yeah, I
years.
do.
Well,
I
read
didn't
that poem
actually.
first.
Yeah,
Yeah, you probably weren't
do
aware of
nobody's
that.
business
Most
for
people
sure.
wouldn't be, but that actually is her. Nobody's business. This, in the sense, is her life. All that happened in between birth and death remained hidden. She hid the unwritten thoughts in her head, didn't think about the likes of love's expressions, but if she were asked, you can guess she'd suppose 'twas enough to bake and boil and roast for the table. Details of what happened, particular days of her life, were without a diary. She didn't say she'd carry gossip anywhere, not even to the grave. Didn't say anything about her epitaph. Didn't say if her life could be written in a book. If it would come out in her will, if it was actually a lifelong secret. She didn't go to any such rounds. She just said, I don't want anyone to know my business.
What's flicked to my head there, I suppose, was like Dan and my granddad and my grandfather would have been quite proud of the fact that they were in their 90s or they were,
Yeah.
or I think
Okay.
Dan would, I think before Dan died, he was quite open about saying I'm 94, 95.
Yeah.
But even when your mother had her 100th birthday there, I suppose this was one of those things you wouldn't be saying happy 100th birthday, like, she wouldn't like to, she would, I don't know, am I right in saying that at the age it was kind of something
No,
she kept very private, like?
well, I don't know, she wouldn't mind a thing like that. But she liked to be, she would certainly like to be recognized for things she did, but she wouldn't go around blowing about things or making noise about things. That's really going on there. Like she wouldn't be shouting from the rooftop, that she was a great person or anything like that. Humility, I suppose.
Yeah. I think that one day Jory Cronin was asked by a journalist in the Observer what age she was, or she kind of said the age anyway, and the journalist printed it. And I think
Okay.
they did to hide the paper over home, for fear she'd see it,
Yeah.
which is
Well, I
fair
mean,
enough. And I suppose,
that's the women would be that way,
yeah,
That's
that's a female thing as well. Like I don't think but I think an age is a private thing, I
I mean,
suppose,
the
especially for a
curious thing
woman.
is, it's a Western issue for people not being proud of their age, whereas in the East and Japan and places, I mean, age is seriously revered. It's the other way around here. We've the wrong values.
The scourging at
Anyway,
the pillar, I was actually going to mention that as well. Yeah, that could be
yeah,
worth sharing.
yeah, that's right. She's behind that poem.
You
Um,
were on the way to Dublin Airport that day, were you?
no, actually, that's again a bit of poetic license.
Okay.
We would have been. She used to have a problem with her back. She had a disc issue, and she used to regularly go to. I would say regularly, but I remember driving her once or twice, and uh, to up to Tipperary to this guy who he was able to put him back in. He was a born man. Um, so that's probably where it would. And she would, of course, we'd have to say the rosary on the way, whether we wanted or not. She'd have us saying the rosary. So the
No,
scourging at the pillar.
I was just I actually just clicked another switch in my head of another story that Donny Cronin told me that he was dropping your mother, my grandfather, and his own father up to Dublin Airport, Cork Airport one day,
Right.
and the rosary was getting a good airing in the car going up, and your mother and Dan were the most enthusiastic of it, but
Was
my grandfather could maybe kind of had a sense that maybe not everyone was enjoying the repetitive, monotonous
well, you see, he was
prayer.
he was he was aware of other people. He was
Yeah,
he wouldn't mind either, but he was aware that probably
yeah,
Tony
and
wasn't too
I
excited.
think kind of he kind of nipped it in the bud anyway by saying, we I think we have enough of it on this stage,
Dodging at the pillar. Some dawn war about turf on the radio went silent at the turn of a knob. And with one mystery a decade on, the speedometer pointed to 40. At first hand, you could see the way the M1 was straightforward that Tuesday. Past the Red Cow Inn, she announced, that scourging at the pillar, our sins on his back, her one-dimensional image captivating as group think, Freudian S&M unheard of from a mother's tongue. Purely she was telling us to look at what the Jews had done, his own people, and without anyone to cross her woes and fortified with the image, speeded up the chant for us all. Hail Mary, full of grace among women. The spring sun shining from the east, a promising day for pilgrims to a physic, to make the half blind to see clearly. That
very
was
good.
uh,
Yeah,
that was it.
the Merchant of Venice was a
Oh
major
yeah,
love of your
right.
mother,
Yeah,
and you mentioned that in her
oh, it was.
eulogy.
Yeah,
Looking back to love is where
that's the poem. Yeah, she loved that. It's actually fascinating. The primary school, Mrs. Griffin was a teacher she'd always reference. She learned this Merchant of Venice at national school, which is interesting nowadays. There's no Shakespearean play, there's no plays or anything like that at national level. But she at national level learned the Merchant of Venice, and she knew it off by heart. I remember one time, I'd say it was probably the 90s. We went to the Opera House in Cork. There was a staging of it. She enjoyed it to the ground. Um, the Merchant of Venice. Looking back to love, I know not why I am so sad. That's the quote from Merchant of Venice. Portia. Mother,
Antonio,
where
isn't
are
it?
you? Antonio, is it? Yeah.
So,
Oh, it is
oh,
Antonio, right?
Antonio.
It is, yeah, it's right. Yeah, he's in love with Portia. Mother, where are you? I borrowed from the old Pole. That opening line is coming from that Polish guy I mentioned there, Czesław Mislasz. I start again. Mother, where are you? I borrowed from the old Pole. Changed the parent, adding rays of sunshine without end. as I looked into the past, its seeds of innocence, she reciting at her own pace. As she glanced around at each face, every word came out by heart, most memorably the merchant. I instanced, prompting, "What about?" In sooth, I know not, then pause as I'd wait for her favourite lines. Notwithstanding the moment, on cue to quote Antonio, her face smiling with the words, "I am to learn." In sooth, I know not why I am to learn. That was it. But the curious thing is, she'd say that with a big smile. And she was loved, and I see the smile, and she's saying, but I mean, technically, it was a sad moment for Antonio when he was saying this.
Yeah, and you know those lines are actually a good parable for depression, like as well, or a good kind of,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
you know,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
I know why I'm so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. You know,
Yeah,
you can
all right,
relate
right,
to.
she knew all those lines. Yeah.
I suppose I grew up. Obviously, growing up, I would have memories of her and my grandfather going to mass together in Ashford. They would have gone up in the one car, and they would have gone.
Oh, yeah.
They would have spent a lot of time together. And I suppose as I grew a bit older and became friendly with the Keatings next door, I would have got to know your mother really well.
Sure.
To the extent I kind of came to look on her as a second grandmother.
Okay.
Um, you know, so I would have a great memories of her. She was always gentle and kind
Yeah, she
natured,
was that. Yeah.
and I remember you saying in your eulogy at her funeral, you were saying about she had a sense of spaciousness, and I suppose you quoted some guy saying it's similar as if you were alone in a room for an hour.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that she
that's
was.
right. Yeah. In silence. Yeah, people can't do that today, which is a pity. Just sit in a room on their own for an afternoon, which is a great thing to do, a very healthy thing to do. You'll find yourself. Anyway, a good thing to do if you wanted to become a bit creative too. You know, you'd be surprised the thoughts that would come.
You had a very good mother son relationship as well,
Oh
didn't
yeah,
you? Like your
yeah, absolutely, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt. So I presume she was always there for me, you know,
yeah.
growing up, and um, all the time. I mean, I wouldn't be saying, but she was. I mean, and I'd say, obviously, maybe the fact I was first born, I don't know, but I know well, like that. There was a reaching there, you know. There was something, um, probably a lot of it unsaid, which is the way things were, you know. But she was always fussing over me, even even my old age.
Yeah. No, she always spoke very highly of you and was very proud of, I suppose, the
Yeah,
college
yeah,
degrees you got and
yeah, right,
just
yeah.
having
Oh,
the
yeah,
book published and the fact you
yeah,
your own business as well, which was
yeah.
great, like, you know.
Good,
So no, I've great memories of her now, like, you know, and I think she left an impression on every one of her grandchildren as well,
yeah,
like, you know. So
good. That's
yeah.
lovely.
My own parents as well, you know, they
Yeah, of
always
course. Yeah,
great
yeah,
memories, like, and
yeah. You have
Joan,
good times. Yeah,
Joan was her godchild
grandmother.
as well.
All
Joan
right. Yeah.
Joan Cronin in Newcastle should be her goddaughter, like, you
Oh,
know.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So no, it was
yeah.
she was a huge loss. And look, I suppose looking back, it was actually good timing she passed away, and she did
Yeah,
because
that's right. Everything. Yeah,
with
yeah,
COVID was
yeah,
around the corner. We didn't know
yeah.
at the time, and we wouldn't have had
No,
the
you're
same
right.
level of saying goodbye and the removal more than
Yeah,
likely, or the funeral or and all that, you know. So
yeah.
as you said in your eulogy at her funeral, she was a very merciful woman.
Mm,
And I suppose Portia's line in The Merchant
mm.
of Venice, the quality of mercy is not strained, a dropper like the gentle rain from heaven. It blessed him who gives and him who takes. Kind of summarize your mother because she was a very merciful woman, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was her favorite poem, a piece from The Merchant.
So moving on, it's nice how how things tie on to the next topic when we move there. But there's a poem you wrote called "The Real Mother's Favor" from Psycho 2, and it was chosen as a runner up in the Golden Pen
Oh yeah,
competition. And I'm a big fan of that poem, and because I can relate to, I can picture you, I can picture even myself as well on a Saturday night
watching.
at 1 or 2 in the morning when kind of they're passing away time and a film like that comes on. it's kind of I can picture that being on late at night at 1 or 2 in the morning, and
Yeah,
and I
and
very much relate to that. And there's a bit of Hamlet in that there as well, and kind of it's a um philosophical poem as well. So
bit, yeah. Yeah, so my sister Mary, I mean, I'm very bad about entering competitions. I just don't do them because, it's any point. Really, historically, I wouldn't have time. And then nowadays, of course, there are you have to use your Visa card. Not that I hesitate sometimes about using my Visa card because you're going into sites you don't know anything about and so forth. But I my sister rang me up and she said there's a competition wherever she saw it. Very interested, so that's how I entered this. Yeah, the real mother's favor in Psycho 2, and I have a quote there: "To this favor must we come, Hamlet." The director introduced another twist in the flick at about 1 a.m. when he directed Norman to perform matricide on the spur on the one who first succored him. Norman was directed to direct her to sit at the kitchen table, face the camera. In turn, she'd utter lines to the effect that she was trying her best to bond with him, darling baby in her eyes. He laid out a cup and saucer before pouring black coffee for her. Her words trickled, tentative at first, soon spilling out her position. He was all she had in the world, never had the courage to face him, couldn't put out of her head, day or night, what had happened at birth. Norman was directed to position himself behind her, he stalking, orchestrating, just as the camera rose to the ceiling to take the critical shot, an angle suggesting, "Oh no, sweet mother of mercy, save her, here comes another." Norman asked if she'd like a sandwich as well, as he handled the only shovel to hand, the same one that he'd favoured in the previous scene for coal for the furnace in the basement. She declined the food, so he lifted the shovel over his head before banging it full force in the back of her skull. Even at 1 a.m., the act looked shocking, but she acted professionally, falling instantly. No last gasp, no mess, the kill perfectly executed. At that moment, the action was all over. However, the credits started to roll on and on, not eye-catching in themselves, but worth a look. Spotting special credit for Sir Alfred Hitchcock, the director responsible for Psycho 1. Copyright 1983 appeared before the end of this psychological thriller. Staring thereafter at a blank screen, one outstanding question, a mortal one, struck me all of a sudden. To what favours must the cast have come since then, without direction?
So you're kind of focusing on, I suppose, how time has passed.
And of course, where are they all gone? But actually, it must have been remade or something. It must have been, the way they update films or they tidy them up. But that film was made in the 60s, wasn't it?
And it did really good. And
83, yeah.
I always empathise with Norman there because obviously he was under his mother's thumb for thing. But it was just really well written poem, and I'm
Yeah,
not surprised it figured as highly.
it's yeah.
Unfortunately, didn't it, like Liverpool, it came second, but if in my
I
opinion
think
it should have won.
a love poem won it.
The
Anyway,
happiness
that's
won
the way
out.
it goes. Yeah,
To this favour must we come as well with the grave diggers. I thought that was
yeah.
very
Hamlet.
poignant.
Yeah.
It's just that no matter how much
Oh, yeah, that's right.
no matter how much you do in life, you'll still end
Yeah,
up like Yorick in the
yeah.
graveyard with the skull with
That's
Hamlet up
right.
there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
fantastic.
that's life. Sure. Your father took that view. He was your grandfather rather, Paddy. He was very stoic about life. He see there's nothing to worry about. That's life is life, and just live with it. He never worried about things like that. I don't think in my presence anyway. I mean, I was young, but I often saw situations where maybe there might be a bit of pressure somewhere. I was in his presence, and he always calmed things down.
Yeah, so fair. So you mentioned Mary there, which again nicely tying on, and there's a
Yeah.
poem you wrote called "Dangerous Liaisons,"
Oh
which
yeah.
a couple of us, Edmund and myself, when we read it first, had a similar thought. By any chance, could have you been referring to your brother-in-law, Ray
I,
Finlayson?
there was. I was missing to a point there. Yeah. Mary really enjoyed it. I remember telling me she thought it was a great poem. I don't think Ray did. He probably he probably is ambiguous about it.
I'd imagine he is. Yeah,
But she was taking the piss out of him.
I had this vision of Ray being like a gigolo in his youth before he met me. Which for
No,
reasons which will become clear when you read this. Just be.
yeah, dangerous liaisons. Of course, there is below in Limerick City, Regina's, a parlour for you where you can get yourself browned up. It's there, and it's Tom Levy's sister owns that, so there's that connection as well. Dangerous liaison. As if embarrassed, Violet whispered words to the effect that she could be selfish enough to fall in love just by lying naked on Ray's bare bed, a sufficient reason to luxuriate in her skin under the electric body of his whitely charged heat, missing none of her pores, still healthy cells, her pre-washed skin, her moisturizer that softens all over, her windows for intimacy all goggled, just in case he'd venture too far. Liberated as she was, she'd still set him against the 30 minutes of her clock. Then, alarmed, having enough, she'd stop him, her sweat reassuring. Tanya, her friend, had always been raving about Ray, always egging on Violet to try him out sometime, that he'd give her the colour to look perfect with or without her little black number. That after a weekly half hour with him, she'd look even more seductive, that he'd heighten her self-esteem, that others would be jealous, misinferior, transformed into less superior. Naturally, Ray was not for free. He charged a fee, but she appreciated that his polish and his result were a fair measure for what she'd spend. Violet made a weekly appointment, and after announcing her arrival at reception, Ray's personal assistant, Regina, would usher her to Ray's room, fit for any queen, painted all over to a high sheen. In-house, the staff referred to their hero, nicknaming him Sunshine. Although the ultimate silent type, you couldn't miss this Sunshine. Impressive, standing erect, ready for action as soon as Violet disrobed. She didn't mind that Regina showed signs that she also loved Ray. Regina carried on as his keeper, the one who used him to express his warm side, his nature, tanning her female customers. Very few females complained after a session. His performance seemed to touch the mysterious X factor, the desire to always want more, invoking Molly's yes, yes, yes. Ray was especially popular with brides-to-be who wanted to look perfect on their wedding day before they'd admit to forsaking all others, close their eyes, wear no more goggles, be patient for a change, show respect, love in the dark. However, if you asked them why they liked to spend time with Ray, to have a machine all over them, they'd look cut out, even coy, trying to distance themselves. They might even spurt out, sounding apologetic, that Ray was useful, but not quite right. No heart, just a bigger fake.
I love the mention of Ulysses as well there, like a James Joyce kind of little
Oh yeah,
nod
that's
there,
right.
like
Yeah, yeah, you're having good man. You're tuned in. Yeah,
um there's a lot of double meaning in your work, and I suppose, and that's why
yeah,
I enjoyed so much that you just scratched beneath the surface a little bit, because
yeah.
there's hidden meanings. But
Just
I remember we're going to talk about rugby is very important to your life as well there, as we're going to come on to
wouldn't it?
that. But I just have a memory which I'm going to share when myself and Edmund were watching the 2009 Heineken Cup final Leinster and Leicester,
Yeah, yeah.
and you were in the room as well.
I
And
don't.
Johnny Sexton kicked a winning penalty with 10 minutes to go. And I actually looked it up on this platform, my second home, YouTube, earlier on in preparation, just to rekindle it because I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
And it was kind of an arcing kick that looked like it was going to last the distance. And was
Okay.
number one was going to go wide, but it slotted in between the posts. And
Sure.
you uttered the immortal words, Johnny Lucky Sexton. And the question, I suppose, the question I was going to ask: will Johnny be lucky in a few weeks' time in the World Cup final? If you
Well,
be, hopefully,
thanks.
you'll be saying the same thing
I
when
hope so.
winning
We hope so.
penalty.
Everybody, and that he'll stay injury free, which is a big ask. Yeah, I hope. I have a feeling they'll go all the way this time.
Yeah, that'd be
I thought they
fantastic.
would with Schmidt back in the, but they obviously peaked too soon. But I have a funny feeling how Fallon has his homework done.
During that game as well, when we were watching it, myself and Edmund were used to regularly quote the Fast Show as kind of our want at the time. Have you seen the Fast Show as a comedy show?
No.
No, it's a UK set in the UK. Basically, there's these two kind of guys in a tailor shop, and when someone is trying on a suit, they always say, "Oh, suit you, sir," like that, like "Oh,"
Yes.
like that, you know. And at one point, Johnny Depp actually made a guest appearance on it because he was a big fan. But it was then obviously they use kind of innuendos and double entendres and all that while they're doing that. But at one stage during the match, there was a very loud scrum where the whole noise where the players went, "Ooh." At that moment, I paid my own tribute and said, "Suit you, sir." Ed got it straight away anyway, so that's the memory.
Yeah, right.
I remember you used to always mention, one thing I remember when you used to call over, you'd always say, "Are you watching a cartoon?"
Oh
That was
yeah.
one, that was one of the first things you were saying. It was usually an adult cartoon of South Park,
Oh
maybe,
yeah.
or
Right. So yeah,
was
I like cartoons.
yeah. Another thing as well. Just another memory I have. We were mentioning A Clockwork Orange came up for some reason,
Oh yeah.
and you were saying you enjoyed it, and I said I enjoyed it, and Ed hadn't seen it, and I think you suggested that we could watch it together sometime.
Yeah.
And me and Ed, I said, like during certain scenes, to avoid any awkwardness, you might want to change the conversation a little, and maybe we might ask you who did you prefer for the Leeds team in the 1970s, the merits of the Leeds midfield, who was better, Brimner or Giles? That would use it to kind of distract the conversation while
Right.
the less controversial scenes, you know. And it just reminded me of a night where we were over home. Myself, Michael, Keith, John, Edmund, and my father were in my sitting room over at home, and one of those phone chat ads came on TV,
Oh, right.
and it was fairly. I think it was a new TV got, so it was fairly big TV at the time, so it was kind of unavoidable. And it just went on that extra bit longer than the average, maybe 5-10 seconds. It was heading towards the minute mark at this point, like, you know, and I suppose we're there trying to avoid eye contact to the TV and trying to, it was just getting awkward, like, so eventually I broke the monotony by saying she's working late tonight. And I got a good laugh. So
Good.
that kind of thing. So rugby, Tom,
Yeah.
is obviously, and it was one of your all-time favorite poems, and it's something we're going to be facing next week.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
good chance that we're going to be
That's right.
facing the title
The All
of
Blacks.
your poem called The
Mm.
Haka,
Yeah. That's right.
one of your all-time favorites.
Yeah, and there's a guy in there, Colin Meads. You probably you haven't Googled him or anything. You know, he would have been a great second row forward for the All Blacks way back '60s, late '60s, early '70s. He did now. He died there about 2 or 3 years ago. He was apparently used to do his training with. He was a farmer, a sheep farmer. He put sheep up in his back and then went up the side of a mountain and down. So can you imagine him coming at you? Anyway, so that I'm just referencing him so people know who Colin Meads is. Aka. In trunks, I trekked the bedroom playing fit. I'm my love fan nicknamed. I'm used to it. Hand ups and leg ups soon became cock ups. Mid sail the ocean blues light melody. Past midnight, with the image of Colin Meads, farmer, second row forward, has been. fabled to give a lift to sheep, the weight on his back for stamina, the lack of it amusing without wit for a male lover. But she, my love fan, posed half naked there. Upon the bed, she said, "Darling, come." Yeah, faking the All Blacks version of the hacker.
I just
That's
got
the
the image
hacker.
there now standing at the end of the bed there in your jock. So thanks for that, Tom. Uh,
That's actually my wife has an awful habit of if I said something that was wrestling like that, she say I'm used to it. So that's one of the nicknames I have for her. I'm used to it. I say anything, I'm used to it.
Brilliant.
She loves that kind of light music, the Gilbert and Sullivan stuff. So that's
You
slightly
you paid
past
tribute to her as
midnight.
well another day with Midsummer
Oh yeah,
Murders, and where I used to watch that
oh
myself
yeah,
actually. So that was
yeah.
nice to pay tribute to
I've
that.
seen them. I've seen them. Yeah.
I really liked the Shannon poem.
That happened. I wrote that poem as a result of the White House is going back about 15 years, maybe now that way. It was probably the time months they were doing very well. But this guy came in one night and he was paranoid about there was a debate going on at the time, and it's still there, but it's not being mooted as much of tapping into the Shannon to service Dublin for the water. You understand the water system in Dublin
Yeah.
is if you could tap into the Shannon. He must have had some angle to this, but he wanted people to obviously make any kind of noise they could and even write a poem about it. But so I wrote this poem about the Shannon, but it's obviously nothing to do with tapping water to service Dublin, but it has it's at the time it's obviously they're down there now along the Shannon. They're near the quay in the town in the city, watching in case people would jump in and people waiting at night there. So go back in and
Yeah.
pick them out. But it's an issue, all right. So that's where that's what I'm talking about. Shannon, it is less than 1 hour to kick off time. Traffic has slowed across Sarsfield Bridge. Adds to the build-up. I look over the ledge, sense your spell, fear your ultimate crime. The Red Army is advancing across. Banter begets some monster supporters. You act normal in the circumstance, flowing relentlessly, full of yourself. And as I stretch, I imagine your laugh. I'm sure of your all see I'm sure that your all-seeing eye has spotted our super hearing differentiated my curse amidst the din, you murdering bitch. You're no Celtic goddess, more likely a witch. Perhaps the gods could take me away for such accusation, but everyone knows how the law stands on its goody lack of innocent till proven guilty. Pity you're not flowing through Saudi Arabia. You'd have been straightened out long ago. Listen, how many times have I tuned into news reports? The tragedy happened in the early hours. Gardaí are appealing for witnesses to ring a given number. I can't take your perversion any longer. The faster I cross this bridge, the better.
Because he does have a sinister kind of air to it,
Yeah,
doesn't it? You know, that particular
absolutely.
bridge.
Yeah, yeah. People are jumping off it. It's terrible.
And if it wasn't for this podcast, we would have passed it a few minutes ago because the match is on at half hour.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
just one more actually. I was just going to ask you to do is with Ed. It was just the night that you're in the cinema with Ed, having to go to hell.
Oh yeah,
It's on
yeah.
55 of my
What
right.
about what about the puck? The puck is reference to Rahina in it about a young fella he's in first class and he's looking through his textbook, his obviously first class textbook, and he sees this picture of a drawing, obviously,
Oh yeah, I just
of
want to read that too. Yeah, yeah.
Cullen. Of it. This picture is supposed to be of Cullen. He's turning to take the shot of the puck at the dog at the fort. And I don't know if this didn't really happen, but I mean it has all the ingredients. I actually read this in Rahina last April. There was World Book Day. We had well, I read a few other things as well, and something from my short stories. to the fifth and sixth class. They invited me back, one of the teachers, to give a bit of a reading for half an hour. So I managed, because they were it was in Rahina, to the national school, it was for World Book Day. So I read this. The puck, that's the puck of a ball. Drawn innocent of foreign allusions, what could have been Pamplona all over. The legend of the fairy fort hinges on Cuchulainn pucking around the field. At the back of his mind, the traditional opener. A Uachtaráin, a Char de Galéir, Tá áthas orm an Corn seo a ghlacha. Borrowed from the history books, modest, cool before the replicated scene, first class, Friday afternoon, Rahina, the pure strike, the thunder and lightning from around the border. In the background, war in the air with me hollow hair, throwing the first Sunday in September. Precursor to a sordid matador. Come on, Cuchulainn, your shot is legend. You have instinct in the back of your head, for in the annals of Gaeldom, half turned towards the dog's mouth, you aim your rasping puck, etched between briars in my schoolboy textbook. Of course, the poem is a bit dated now because the All-Ireland final isn't on the first Sunday in September anymore.
No, it isn't something I agree with
That's a
either.
pity. No, yeah, it was. Anyway, it won't be changed back, let's say.
Having to go to hell is
Yeah. So that happened. Myself and then went to the pictures one night, from back a few years, and sitting down, so the poem explains it, and the actual cinema below in Limerick, and they had some problem with the projector, so they offered us to go to another film. I was to wait for half an hour and they'd fix it, so we said we'd go to another film. Having to go to hell. When we finally reached screen number 4, we reached standard regulation steps, climbing all the way to the last one to sit in the back row through the feature. We had organised our arrival well, we thought, to coincide with the schedule. Patrons waited for that seductive sign, but the lights did not dim to expectation. Nor did the usual adverts draw us in, ads like the sure one, it won't let you down. The manager appeared at the bottom with an entourage of 4, maybe more. He announced that the projector was down with an engineering hitch, a shock for us, a reminder that the Terminator was not so much real as made up in a reel. The manager apologized, briefed us. Terminator would be delayed an hour. He suggested a couple of options, each worse than the next. We took the first one. We could go next door to Drag Me to Hell. Anyway, we didn't want to suffer, to sidestep strangers in the foyer. The Hell film would be starting in minutes. The manager endorsed our 2 tickets, seemingly relieved that we were happy, that we were positive going to hell. Finally, we descended, single file, all the way down the steps around the corner, indifferent to the worn down pile, not bothering to look back, our last chance before we completed the crossover, before we were out of sight of the couple left behind to ponder as the fire door swung closed behind us.
Well, if they saw popcorn and minsters in hell, I've no bother checking out there. Like,
yeah, you're on your way.
And just looking there, just looking at the background, it looks like the flames are. I'm halfway there anyway, but my profile podcast emblem, like so.
You had a lovely image, the podcast you had about Michael Hartnett's poem about Maiden Street at Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
That was very homely.
That actually, I remember you were saying about the fires there. Was it you're looking at the fire one night, which I think actually this is the very last right. one. Oh, yeah. The one where you were sitting beside the fire and your son, you're asking about
Thomas. Yeah,
I meant to thank you as well. While we're trying to find that there, you mentioned Cronin's Track in Spongeball.
Oh yeah.
And there was one day we had a freezing where the time of there was a very cold winter. I'd say it was 97, and I decided to stand on top of the track, where, and I suppose bravado, for want of a better term, But it I live to tell the tale anyway. But it just struck a
Okay,
chord with me. The Stove is the
okay.
name of
Poem, yeah.
yeah,
I have it.
yeah.
The Stove, yeah. It was my micro hell after the news. As far as I could see, the heaped coal was radiating what it was like in the Divine Comedy, even hotter than the sun, I imagined, and with a threatening glow as it smirked at the prospect that I would be a piece of coal one day to add to the glory of God's original prototype. The fire looked away from me, insulting and acting superior as only a prime element can, showing how potent it was trapped in our new stove. For sure, it was ruthless as it burned, filled with pleasure by my cold wife. Perhaps she was offering me inspiration, how life could always be. She broke the glow's spell, holding my arm. I love a damn good fire. Its chaos is as breathtaking as a dreamed lover. My son was indifferent online till I asked if he'd like to be in there forever.
Yeah, it's an image. It's not, but
That
it's
that that
not the most appealing. I
that
would have
took
said
him away
myself.
from his screen.
I think at this
There's
stage,
one poem I've written down there. I don't know if you have time or not.
I don't have
It's
a time away yet.
called Conquers. It's in my first collection. Um, it sums up probably what life was like for us young fellas in Rahina in the 60s. You know, this we were up to no good half the time. Conquers. Autumn was always our season of nuts and of exuberant forgetfulness. Marxist consciousness of no consequence. We, unwitting peasants, feckless creatures, outsiders in the scheme of history, without others, for they had their dollies. Anyway, we never struggled, but exulted, ignoring constraints, wind howling, us climbing rust-eaten chained gates. Searchers, we've picked up gravity's chestnuts, nature's ready-made tools from the trees. They were there on the spot for us lads to take back, to go one-to-one at Conquers, and in turn we display impatience. Fair is fair, you missed even fair dues. Sometimes expressing defeat with soldiers' words, as one nut would crack, sometimes to pieces. A tough feeling swelling when we conquered, empowering to taunt, to stamp nicknames. Perhaps the most interesting part was concentrating when we gathered together, as with a one-track mind we'd drive a nail through the nut's resistant flesh at the centre, threading binder twine or a lace without fail, forming a knot, a stopper. Maybe misuse our weapons in a test run, routine lashes on our legs or in shot pants, as we kicked and fought back, trying to avoid. Some days, after we'd gathered a surplus, we'd get extra crack out of our gual, firing shots into the air with hurleys, ignoring the few windows in the village with its by-road, almost traffic-free stretch. During other seasons, we'd drop the nuts for an appropriate exuberance. Our village then, a converted tombstone. Indeed, at every chance, we'd be cowboys.
Very good. It kind of sums up
The game.
the game
Yeah.
and messing.
Do kids do that anymore, I wonder? Play
Conquers.
Conquers. Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I think they were
You know,
going out of fashion in my time anyway. But
yeah. For an awful thing one time. That
just
and
dogs, I suppose, are very important to you. I'd say.
well,
Um,
they used to be. I got out of the greyhounds. I eventually gave them up because even though I still love greyhound racing and all that, yeah, time moved on and the game changed a bit. You know, it changed quite a bit. And these new tracks came in and didn't suit me because if you went to a dog track, let's say back in 20 years ago, even you'd be there all night. You know, and it didn't suit me working, having to get up in the mornings, 7 o'clock or half seven. If you were the dog in the last race in the car, say o'clock on a Saturday night, you could still be there at 10:30, a quarter to 11. You'd get back to Broadford at 12:15. Then you might have a cup of tea or something. You'd put the dog away and feed him. It's just at half one at 2 o'clock. You'd be going to bed up again, and not only that, but the boys grew up, Edmund especially, and I'd known to gallop dogs with me. The thing had changed as well locally. Back in the 80s, maybe into the early 90s, you could whistle out there on the street and you get any young fella come and gallop dogs with take him to tracks. But that changed. After a while, they'd be looking for money to be paid to do it. So the fun went out of it, and just got out of
No, it's just I suppose you
yeah.
can tell the fact that like getting the nod from himself is written from the point of view of a dog called etc.
Oh yeah.
And there's a
Well,
few. I actually found that book. I found it hard to get into at
yeah,
first, but having read Paul Ball and Lomu,
yeah,
sorry, there's been a few stories from the dog's point of view, and I'm going to give it another go now because I really
yeah,
enjoyed the Barney's jail journal and a
yeah. Oh
couple of
yeah.
other
Yeah.
stories from the dog's
You should.
viewpoint.
That's actually a great book. The first book. I can say that from a distance now. It came out in 2015, but lately I was back at to the Sunday afternoon. Poetry in the Park, they call it, but it doesn't have to be poetry. I read an extract from it, mainly because I was near Ballybunion, and a lot of people from that side, they identify with it. But there's an excerpt there where the little dog is set in Ballybunion. He's in Ballybunion. It's during the summer, and he's saying good luck to his. He's had a really, these, what do you call it, holiday flings. He had a holiday fling, but he had to break up with her because of the fact that she like he was immortal. He couldn't try to explain to her how that the time would come when he'd still be around and he'd be young and she'd be gone old. So he figured it was time enough to get out, which he did. Etc. has arrived in Ballybunion, and it's the summer time, and he's he has he's having an affair with this lady called Jacinta. She's obviously a dog, a bitch. Now I just read the bit. Now in this little segment, he's actually going to break off from her, right? So I read on. My seaside affair with Jacinta lasted through most of the summer. We went everywhere together, marveling at the natural wonders of the place, relaxing in each other's arms in hay barns, rising at dawn, swimming in our favourite pond. Because Ballybunion people have always been used to seeing seaside romances in full bloom, most of the time myself and Jacinta were given the space to express our love for each other. It was while Jacinta and I were laughing at the thought of I've earlier said that there was the story of Archimedes, the story in the bath. It was while Jacinta and I were laughing at the thought of the behavior of the unfortunate Archimedes that my eureka moved moment came. Realizing I had to carry a secret that was probably of the magnitude of one of the secrets of Fatima, I accepted that it would be unfair on Jacinta to continue in an intimate relationship with her. And so reached the Castle Rocks, the ones that separate the women's from the men's strand, I stopped and stood before her. I told her that she was a very special bitch, that any dog would be proud to have her as a life partner, that it might come as a shock to her that I had made up my mind to leave the Ballybunion area and that I was becoming restless and was planning to go to Clare to see the cliffs of Moher, where I hoped to find some new owners. I added that she could check me out, as the Americans would be wont to say in future time, if she decided to go there on holidays. And then I did what I thought was paradoxically the honest thing to do in the circumstance. I told her a lie. I told her that I was not the dog for her, that even though I was very fond of her and valued her friendship, I could never love her as a regular dog, which meant we could never settle down together. I played on her intellectual strength, saying that I hoped I didn't have to spell out my situation. As I watched her walk out of my life, I could see vulnerability in the stop-start manner of her short, laboured strides. Late evening had become well established, caused, as we all know, by the sun, as well as on its way, sinking graciously in the horizon of this saddest of days. The beach had become otherwise deserted. To the left of me, the sea was going out as if in retreat to the new world, and for 1 nanosecond, I imagined that the rocks were moving, or to be precise, standing back so as to give space to Jacinta's shock, as if to indicate that they wished to absorb some of it. As they seemed to move, I saw another strange thing. Their coats of moss began to peel. Even the mutt in me could sense in that instant that nature was not impressed by my estrangement from matters of the haft. All the while overhead, the cawing from the seagulls had a threatening quality, as if saying, etc., you miserable bastard, you have spoiled this spiritual place. You're no longer welcome here. When you get to the cliffs of Moher, do the world a favour and jump off. I just said that scene might be interesting.
What a name for a character, like etc. You know,
yeah, because he's immortal, of course.
he
So
goes on forever.
it goes on forever. Yeah. So
Because I know I could tell that dogs are very important to you in the sense that I could always respect them, and you really kind of bat for the dogs. Even Barney's jail journal, I suppose you wouldn't like to hear anyone who was mistreating dogs, but you'd hear of some people who have dogs, those who pat them in like sardines, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think it's just important, I suppose, that you know.
I don't know how I got the. It just happened, I suppose, probably with that book more so, that getting the nod. But I think they're a wonderful opportunity because, of course, I'm familiar with dogs and that their mentality that I was able to use, etc. The dog as he's just an avenue into the idea of immortality and somebody leaving on, you know. And it's just a mock. It's a mock heroic story. There's a very good piece there, I think, on where he becomes a little pet dog to a bishop. I was telling you that was I bought, you know, Galway Strayabs is the bishop's cook.
Yeah.
That section, and there's another piece there where he meets a priest, who the bishop meets the priest, and the bishop wants to know how he came to be. He got his vocation. So the priest explains that he had an aunt, his grandmother rather, Ellen. She came to him in a vision, and she taught him all about heaven and what was going on. And Christy Ring turns up in that. He's lined up while they're waiting at the pearly gates. He's with Ellen, and there's a little line. It might be much good out to Limerick people, but there's a line in it, a little caveat in it, where he says to Ellen that he was going to present a hurley. He had a hurley in his hand. He's going to present the hurley to God, and she said that bit presumptuous. And Ring said, "Well, no," he says, "it's just from one God to another."
You actually met Christy as well. You met Christy as well.
I did. Yeah. He's come to Cantor, not much, but now and again he came down delivering shed oil. My father would be in heaven when he'd arrive, of course, but he was a shy man, you know. He wasn't big into talking about things.
There was a great poem inspired by his saying in Tipperary that a great summer in Tipperary was Cork beaten, the hay saved. And it goes, Cork is beat, the hay is saved, the thousands wildly sing. You speak too soon, my sweet Garsoon, for here comes Christy Ring.
Very good, yeah.
There was a man back home in Rahena, John Joe Dore, who was fairly
fond
of
him. Yeah. John Joe Dore he was a big fan of him, and he I don't know what I've often thought afterwards, when as much as I've thought of it at all. Whenever I'd meet John Joe Dore, he wouldn't say hello to me at all. He'd stand there in front of me and say, "Christy Ring, the bag of tricks, putting the ball between the sticks." I like to think he was referring to myself.
I think was there some story as well when Christy Ring was being buried? Was he at the burial? And
Christy, he was. I think he was. Yeah.
When Christy was laid down,
he did. He would have gone to us. Yeah.
When Christy was laid down into the grave, he was like that. That was the first time that you've been put down, Christy, like, or something along those lines. Like, that just reminded me there that I was actually honoured that when your own mother was buried, I helped shoulder the coffin into the graveyard, and I was one of helped lay her down as well. So that just came into my head randomly.
Interesting.
Paul the Ball and
Yeah,
Lomu. I finished reading it there
yeah,
last night. There's some brilliant stories
okay,
in it.
yeah. Good.
The
Excellent.
Mrs. Magdalene's. I enjoyed. I suppose there's Mrs. Magdalene's
Oh
Upright
yeah,
Cross,
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
and it kind of reminded me, for any Simpsons fans watching, it kind of reminded me of kind of one of the first episodes where Marge contemplates a fling with with the French bowling player Jack, I think was his name. But Mrs.
Okay.
Magdalene lived up to her name anyway, and she went ahead with it, unlike Marge, and
Yeah.
there's a product of that. And Liverpool fans, it might be worth checking out Tom's story, Doubt Everything, as he pays a silent
Oh
tribute
yeah.
to Liverpool's comeback against AC Milan in 2005 Champions League final.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
I was way off, I'm guessing, was I?
It's probably hurling match right in my head, but you could apply it to Liverpool.
Yeah. But it was just the fact 3-0 down, and
I
then
like that story. It's only a page and a half, but I think I like it.
the Eastern Sky, and you have Karl
Yeah.
Marx with the whole Liverpool connection with communism.
The end of it is lovely. I like the end of it. I say I've had one or two people not knowing what am I trying to say, but anyway,
Mary Antoinette was serving something other than cake to her husband. You have an analogy of a gambler, very good
oh
analogy
yeah,
there, and kind of
oh that's
obviously
right, yeah.
gambling.
It took a long time to write. I kind of rewrote it. I put more dialogue into it.
I was going to read The Count of Monte Cristo, but you kind of summed up the book in 4 lines there in Barney's Jail
Oh yeah,
Journal, so I'm less inclined to read it now. So,
I saved you so much. A tweet.
you summarized it
Good.
nicely.
The time is important, so you save time.
There's another short story as well where there was a in it where there's a poetry launch, and there's a
Oh
white
yeah,
powder handed out which might be
oh yeah,
interpreted as
yeah.
Colombian castor sugar to help
Something like that.
with
Yeah.
the buzz. But you'll be glad to
How
know,
would
Tom, I haven't needed Colombian castor sugar yet anyway to enjoy your work. So
right? But it's that's a really spoofy story, you know.
yeah,
But I was inspired by. I went to a launch of fellow was bringing out a novel there about 2 years ago. And it was below the hotel in Newcastle West, and since I got the idea of it, nothing to do with his book, but I just worked away on it. And there is a famous poem called "Howl" by an American poet back in the '60s. I can't think of his name now. Um, to read that, you nearly want to read that first and then read the story. You get the best out of it, you know. Anyway, that's I say some people probably have read that story and don't know what's going on. But see, in modern day short stories, there's a theory out there. What's important in a short story is what happens afterwards. When the story is over, it has the reader wondering, I wonder what happened after that. You should
yeah,
leave the story kind of open for the reader to reflect, and
yeah.
you don't tidy it up for them. Leave it hanging.
Yeah, I think kind of it reminds me of kind of
Yeah,
Joyce's Dubliners, a couple of them there, like
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
no,
He
it's
probably,
one I really enjoyed reading there, and I'd recommend. You mentioned Waiting for Godot as well, and the Windmills. Kind of, it's.
oh yeah, I did forget about
Uh,
that.
when did you actually get into poetry first, Tom? Was it like what kind of?
I'd say I used to do a small bit of it. I was in when I say in my mid-teens, I had poems written. I wouldn't have them now. I'm probably better off written about Cloncon, the bridge above there at Cloncon, or that bridge above Ear
Yeah,
Bridge up there, and be kind of pastoral type poems, you know. And then I did a bit of it in college. Again, I'd say they weren't up to much. I might have still have a few of them, but I wouldn't let anyone see them. And then it stopped, and then I got something happened. I'd say in the early '90s. Um, just had a kind of a click in my head, and I started writing again.
very
And
good.
that's the history of it.
Yeah, you've a lot. You always had kind of a turn for it, like So,
Yeah, that's
uh,
right. Yeah.
for anyone who was interested in getting into writing or poetry, or what advice would you give to any budding poets, budding authors?
They'll always tell you you should read if you want to write. You know, you can't just pick up a pen and write if you want to. Well, you have to find your own voice. You know, it's so. I mean, in a sense, I have a kind of a voice that's a spoofy voice, and it's a mock heroic voice most of the time. It has that element to you, yourself from reading the stuff. So people have different voices, and they're all valid. You can't say one is right or one is wrong. But if you like something that's written, then you could maybe imitation is the worst thing you could do. Of course, is do your own thing. That's how you define a writer. A writer is someone who writes.
By definition, yeah.
Yeah.
How are you
Yes.
enjoying retirement, Tom? Are you happy enough?
Oh, great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Do you
delighted
miss the
with it.
shop at all, or
Oh, I don't really. No, I don't. I mean, I didn't make a snap decision to leave. I was thinking about it and thinking about it, and I figured it was time to go. Partly because the shop needed to be revamped and it needed a new look and things, and I wasn't going to do that. The boys have no interest in moving in doing the shop, obviously, and so I was pension age, and I've two pensions, so time to retire. Take it
and,
easy.
and the good news for the new owners is that they didn't need to change the sign because they're Maloney's as well, no
Oh,
relation.
yes, right. I think they took off the Moloney. They put up Daybreak. I can imagine what's going on there. They're probably in agreement there, which is fine.
But it was just apt at the time, like that.
Oh yeah,
Maloney's
sometimes
both.
the curious one. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does the future hold for Tom Maloney? Would you there be more books in the pipeline? Would you say?
There would be that. I have another novel written. I have another bunch of short stories, and I have a full collection written. But I don't know about putting them out. I might put them online. I don't, the bother of having launches is a big hassle. I don't know if it would happen anymore. But I'm if I had someone like you locally now who'd be very good at IT, I could get you to put it all online for me. Maybe down the road it might
Oh
happen.
yeah, reach out to me whenever you want, and I
Yeah,
might
very good. Yeah, that's
uh,
all that's holding me back. So eventually,
so
I
look,
might get back to you.
hopefully it won't be your last time popping by the fireside, Tom, for a chat.
Yeah.
Um,
Thanks very much. Yeah, we
thanks very
keep
much.
in touch. Very good. Thanks very much,
Thanks, Tom.
Paul.
Thanks very much for coming on this evening. So I hope you've enjoyed the chat this evening, everyone. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notifications bell. And we'll see you next time on the Parley Padre podcast. Good night. God bless.
Thank you very much.